The alien ships moved through space like hungry wolves. Their dark hulls twisted and pulsed with a sickly green light. These were not machines built in factories. These were living things that had been grown in the depths of space, fed on metal and energy until they became weapons. Warprime Zexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars ahead. His 6 eyes glowed with satisfaction. Another star system would fall today. Another world would feed his fleet. The humans called his people the Kethmoran, but he preferred a simpler name. They were the Devourers. For 10 years, his armada had swept across the galaxy like a plague. 17 star systems had fallen before them. Billions of lives had been consumed. Entire civilizations had been reduced to nothing more than fuel for his bioships. The secret was simple. His ships could adapt. When the enemy fired energy weapons, his vessels grew thick armor that absorbed the beams. When they used kinetic rounds, his ships became flexible, bending like rubber. When they tried to ram his fleet, his vessels simply split apart and reformed around the attacking ships. Every battle made his armada stronger. Every enemy weapon became a lesson. His bioships learned and grew and evolved with each victory. The Altarians had tried first. Their crystal ships were beautiful and deadly, firing beams of pure light that could cut through asteroids. But after 3 battles, Zexthal's fleet had grown mirror-like hulls that reflected the light back at them. The crystal ships shattered like glass. The Nexari came next with their phase-shifting fighters that could become invisible and strike from any angle. It took longer to adapt to them, but his ships eventually learned to sense the quantum disturbances. The Nexari fighters were hunted down one by one. The ancient Vorthek Empire had been the hardest fight. Their siege platforms were older than most civilizations and armed with weapons that could crack planets. But even they fell when his bioships learned to absorb and redirect their planet-killer beams. Now the Galactic Council was in full retreat. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was breaking apart. Species after species fled to the far rim, abandoning entire sectors to save themselves. Zexthal did not blame them. Fear was logical when facing extinction. His communications officer, a creature with 4 arms and no visible head, approached him. "Warprime, we are receiving panic transmissions from the target system. The Council fleets are evacuating." "Good," Zexthal replied, his voice like grinding metal. "Less resistance for us to adapt to." On the main screen, a new star system appeared. The humans called it the Outer Colonies. 5 planets orbited a yellow star. 3 were mining worlds rich in metals his ships could digest. 2 were agricultural. Planets that grew food his army could consume. According to intelligence reports, the humans were primitives. They still used chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. Their technology was centuries behind the other Council species. Some of his officers had suggested simply ignoring the human worlds and moving on to richer targets. But Zexthal was thorough. He had not conquered 17 star systems by being careless. Every world in his path would fall. Every species would be consumed. That was the way of the Devourers. "How many ships do the humans have in this system?" he asked. The communications officer checked his readings. "Sensor scans show minimal military presence, Warprime. A few patrol craft and cargo vessels. Nothing that poses a threat to our forces." Zexthal nodded. It was always the same. The advanced species put up fierce resistance at first, then crumbled when their technology proved useless. The primitive species usually surrendered immediately or fled without fighting. He looked out at his armada and felt pride swell in his chest. 200 bioships stretched out in formation around his flagship. Each one was unique, having grown and adapted based on the battles it had survived. Some were sleek and fast, designed to hunt down fleeing ships. Others were massive and armored, built to absorb punishment and keep fighting. His flagship, the World Eater, was the largest of all. It had been grown from the core of a destroyed planet and fed on the energy of dying stars. Its bio-armor had adapted to every weapon type in the galaxy. Its living cannons could fire beams of concentrated death that turned entire fleets to vapor. "Signal the fleet," Zexthal commanded. Begin the approach. Standard formation. The mining worlds first, then the agricultural planets. As his orders spread through the armada, the bioships began to move. They did not fly like normal spacecraft. Instead, they undulated through space like sea creatures swimming through an ocean. Their living hulls rippled and pulsed as internal. Organs pumped nutrients and energy throughout their massive bodies. The World Eater led the way, its sensor tendrils tasting the solar winds for signs of resistance. Behind it, the rest of the armada followed in a formation that had been perfected through dozens of conquests. Zexthal activated his personal communicator and opened a channel to his fleet commanders. Begin standard adaptation protocols. Scan for defensive technologies and prepare countermeasures. I want this system consumed within 72 hours. Acknowledgements came back from across the fleet. His commanders were experienced predators who had never known defeat. They would coordinate the attack with ruthless efficiency. As the armada moved deeper into the human system, Zexthal reviewed the intelligence reports one more time. The humans had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago. Their technology was laughably primitive by galactic standards. They used gunpowder and metal bullets while other species wielded energy weapons and gravity manipulators. Some reports suggested the humans were unusually aggressive for such a primitive species. They had fought several border wars with their neighbors and showed little respect for established galactic law. But aggression without technology was meaningless. Courage could not stop his bioships from adapting to their weapons. The first mining world appeared on his sensors. It was a barren rock covered in deep excavations where the humans dug for metals, perfect food for his ships. War Prime, his sensor operator called out. We are detecting movement near the third planet. A single ship is departing from the inner system. Zexthal studied the readings with interest. Analysis? It appears to be a human warship. Mass suggests heavy cruiser. Classification? It is moving to intercept our forces. A laugh rumbled from deep in Zexthal's throat. One ship. A single primitive vessel was coming to challenge his entire armada. Either the humans were braver than he had expected or more foolish. Let it come, he decided. We will make an example of it. The other human worlds will see what happens to those who resist the devourers. The bioships began to spread out as they approached the mining worlds. Their living sensors probed ahead, searching for defenses and cataloging potential threats. A single human ship continued its approach, impossibly small against the vast bulk of the Kethmoran armada. Zexthal felt a moment of disappointment. He had hoped for more resistance. A proper battle to test his ship's latest adaptations. Instead, he would have to content himself with crushing one obsolete warship and watching the human colonies surrender. Still, every conquest added to his legend. Every victory made his name more feared across the galaxy. Soon, even the most distant civilizations would hear the stories and flee rather than face the World Eater. The human ship was close enough now to appear on visual sensors. It was ugly by galactic standards, all sharp angles and crude armor plating. Chemical rockets pushed it through space instead of the elegant gravity drives used by advanced species. Signal the humans, Zexthal ordered. Tell them to surrender. Their ship and their worlds will be spared. Give them one chance to avoid extinction. As his communications officer sent the message, Zexthal settled back to wait for their reply. In a few hours, this system would belong to the Devourers. The humans would join the long list of species that had fallen before his unstoppable armada. He had no way of knowing that he was about to face something no alien mind could understand. He was about to discover what happened when humans were pushed too far. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched death approach. Through the main view screen, she could see the alien fleet spreading across space like a cancer. 200 bioships moved with deadly purpose toward the human colonies. The Defiance was alone. Elena had been a starship captain for 23 years. She had fought pirates, smugglers, and hostile aliens along the frontier. But she had never faced anything like this. The reports from other sectors painted a clear picture. The Kethmoran were unstoppable. Every fleet sent against them had been destroyed or absorbed. Her ship was old. The Defiance had been built 97 years ago when humanity first reached the stars. She was a relic from an earlier time when human ships were built thick and tough instead of fast and clever. Her hull was solid steel and ceramic instead of the energy shields used by newer vessels. Her weapons were magnetic railguns and nuclear torpedoes. Instead of particle beams and gravity bombs, most of the Galactic Council considered human technology primitive. Elena had heard the jokes. Humans still used gunpowder and metal bullets, while other species wielded energy that could reshape matter itself. But today, those primitive weapons were all that stood between the colonies and extinction. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the evacuation fleets. They're asking for our status." Elena looked around her bridge. 47 men and women worked at their stations, preparing for a battle they could not win. These were good people, colonists who had volunteered for military service to protect their homes. Engineers and miners who had learned to fight because someone had to. "Tell them we're buying time," Elena said. "Estimated delay is 6 hours. 6 hours." That was her best guess for how long the Defiance could survive against the alien armada. Long enough for the civilian ships to reach the outer system and jump to hyperspace. Long enough for 8 million people to escape. Her tactical officer, Commander Zhang, looked up from his displays. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the alien fleet. Their lead ship is the size of a small moon." Elena nodded. She had seen the intelligence reports. The Kethmoran flagship was called the World Eater. It had destroyed entire fleets by itself. Against such a monster, her single cruiser was nothing more than an insect. "Signal from the alien fleet," the communications officer announced. "They're demanding our surrender? Put it on screen." The main display flickered and showed an alien face that looked like a nightmare. 6 glowing eyes stared out from a head covered in chitinous plates. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately. Your species will be absorbed into our collective. Resistance is futile." Elena stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Defiance. You want these colonies, you'll have to go through us." The alien's eyes flared with what might have been amusement. "One primitive ship against our entire armada? Your courage is admirable but pointless. We have consumed civilizations far more advanced than yours." "Maybe," Elena replied, "but they weren't human." She cut the transmission before the alien could respond. Around her, the bridge crew was silent. They all knew what they had just committed to. A fight to the death against impossible odds. "Battle stations," Elena commanded. "All hands to combat positions. This is not a drill." Throughout the ship, alarm klaxons began to wail. 847 crew members rushed to their posts. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Marcus Chun brought the fusion reactor to full power. In the weapons bays, gunners loaded railgun rounds and armed nuclear torpedoes. In damage control stations, repair teams prepared for the worst. Elena walked to her command chair and activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. In 10 minutes, we will engage an enemy force that outnumbers us 200 to 1. Every military strategist would call this suicide. They're probably right." She paused, looking around at her crew. These people had families in the colonies. Children and parents and loved ones who were depending on the evacuation fleets to carry them to safety. "But we're not here to win," Elena continued. "We're here to buy time. Every minute we keep those ships busy is another minute for our people to escape. Every shot we fire is a statement that humanity doesn't run from bullies, no matter how big they are." She took a deep breath. "The Kethmoran think they know humans. They think we're primitives with obsolete weapons. Today we're going to teach them that human technology has one advantage they've never encountered. It's operated by humans." A cheer went up from across the ship. Not a loud battle cry, but a grim acknowledgement of what was to come. These people were afraid, but they were Ready? Elena sat down and strapped herself into her chair. Helm, take us in. Maximum burn. The Defiance surged forward as her chemical rockets ignited at full power. She was not graceful like the newer ships with their gravity drives. She was a blunt instrument that smashed through space with raw thrust and determination. On the tactical display, Elena watched the alien fleet respond to her approach. The bioships began to spread out, surrounding her vessel like wolves circling prey. She counted the enemy vessels and felt her heart sink. 200 ships, each one larger than her cruiser. Weapons range in 30 seconds, Commander Zhang reported. Elena studied the tactical situation. The smart move would be to stay at long range and use her railguns to pick off smaller ships, but that would give the aliens time to adapt to her weapons. Every report said the same thing. The Kefmoran bioships learned from each attack and grew stronger. She needed to hit them hard and fast before they could adapt. Change course, she ordered. Take us directly at their flagship. Captain? Zhang looked shocked. That ship masses 50 times more than us. Exactly, they won't expect a direct assault. Sometimes the best strategy is the one that makes no sense. The Defiance adjusted course, diving straight toward the massive alien flagship. Around them, smaller bioships moved to intercept, but Elena's ship was moving too fast for them to block her path. Incoming transmission from the alien flagship, the communications officer called out. Ignore it, Elena said. They can talk to our torpedoes. The range counter on her display continued to drop. 2,000 kilometers, 1,500, all weapons fire. The Defiance erupted in flame and thunder. Her 6 railguns fired in sequence, sending tungsten slugs racing toward the alien flagship at incredible speed. Nuclear torpedoes streaked away from her launch tubes, their fusion drives burning bright against the darkness. For a moment, Elena felt hope. Her weapons struck the alien ship with devastating force. The railgun rounds punched deep into the living hull while the nuclear warheads detonated in brilliant flashes. Then her hope died. The alien ship was already healing. The holes torn by her railguns were closing as the bio-armor grew and adapted. The radiation from her nuclear weapons was being absorbed and converted into energy for the creature's metabolism. No effect on target, Zhang reported grimly. Elena had expected this, but seeing it happen was still crushing. The most powerful weapons in her arsenal had been shrugged off like insect bites. Around her ship, smaller biovessels were closing in. Their living hulls rippled as they prepared to fire their own weapons. Energy beams lanced out, striking the Defiance's armored hull. Elena felt her ship shudder under the impact, but the old armor held. For now, damage report, she called out. Minor hull scoring on decks 7 and 12, came the reply. No critical systems affected. That was something. At least, the Defiance had been built to take punishment. Her thick armor might not be as elegant as energy shields, but it could absorb a lot of damage before failing. Evasive maneuvers, Elena ordered. Keep us moving. Don't let them get a clear shot. The old cruiser twisted and turned through space, her chemical thrusters firing in complex patterns. She was not as agile as newer ships, but she was tougher. When energy beams struck her hull, she absorbed the damage and kept fighting. Elena looked at her chronometer. 2 minutes since the first attack. The evacuation fleets would still be loading refugees from the outer colonies. She needed to keep the aliens busy for 5 hours and 58 minutes more. It was going to be the longest 6 hours in human history. The battle had been raging for 37 minutes. The Defiance spun through space like a wounded animal, her hull scarred by energy beams and plasma fire. But she was still fighting. Captain Vasquez gripped her command chair as another blast shook the ship. Around her, the bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and the lights flickered, but no one stopped working. Hull breach on Deck 9, reported the damage control officer. Emergency teams are sealing it now. Weapons status? Elena asked. Commander Zhang checked his displays. Railgun 3 is offline. We're down to half ammunition on the torpedo tubes, but the main battery is still operational. Elena nodded. The Defiance was dying slowly, but she was taking her time about it. The old ship had been built to absorb punishment, and she was proving her designers right. Chief Engineer Marcus Chun appeared on the bridge, his uniform torn and his face smudged with grease. He had been crawling through damaged sections personally, overseeing repairs. "Captain, I need to talk to you," he said quietly. Elena looked at the tactical display. 23 alien ships surrounded her vessel, firing in coordinated patterns. Each time her weapons struck them, they adapted faster than before. What had taken minutes during the first exchange now took only seconds. "Make it quick, Chief." Chun moved closer and lowered his voice. "I've been studying their adaptation patterns. Every time we hit them with the same weapon type, they get better at stopping it. But I noticed something." He activated a small data pad and showed her a series of readings. "Look at these energy signatures. When they adapt to railgun fire, their bioarmor gets denser. When they adapt to energy weapons, it becomes more reflective. But they can't do both at the same time." Elena studied the data. Chun was right. The alien ships were incredibly adaptable, but they had to choose what to adapt to. They couldn't be immune to everything simultaneously. So if we hit them with different weapon types at the same time, she began. "They have to pick which one to defend against," Chun finished. "And while they're adapting to one, they're vulnerable to the other?" Elena felt a spark of hope for the first time since the battle began. It wasn't much, but it was something. A weakness in the seemingly perfect alien defense. "How many different weapon types do we have?" she asked. Chun counted on his fingers. "Railguns, nuclear torpedoes, plasma cannons from the point defense system, and the mining charges we picked up at Asteroid Station 7. Mining charges? Industrial explosives. Not designed as weapons, but they pack a punch. The aliens won't have seen anything like them before." Elena turned to her weapons. "Officer. Lieutenant Park, can you fire all weapon types simultaneously?" Park looked confused. "Captain, that goes against all tactical doctrine. We're supposed to concentrate our fire for maximum effect." "Forget doctrine," Elena said. "I want you to hit the same target with 4 different weapon types within a 2-second window. Can you do it?" "Yes, ma'am." "But our accuracy will suffer." "That's fine. We're not trying to be accurate, we're trying to be confusing." Elena studied the tactical display and picked her target. A medium-sized bioship that had been adapting quickly to her railgun fire. Its hull had grown thick and metallic, perfect for stopping kinetic rounds. "Target the ship at bearing 27 Mark III, she ordered. "Full spread, all weapon types. Fire on my mark." The weapons officer programmed the attack sequence. Around the ship, the crew held their breath. This was either going to work or waste their remaining ammunition. "Mark!" The Defiance erupted in a display of human firepower. Railgun rounds streaked toward the target while nuclear torpedoes raced alongside them. Plasma bolts from the point defense system followed a split second later. Finally, a jury-rigged mining charge shot from the cargo bay. Propelled by a small chemical rocket. Elena watched the alien ship try to adapt. Its bioarmor began to shift, becoming more reflective, to stop the plasma fire. But that made it vulnerable to the railgun rounds, which punched through the softened hull. The nuclear torpedo detonated against the weakened armor while the mining charge exploded inside the ship's biostructure. The alien vessel convulsed and went dark. "Direct hit," Darren shouted. "Target is destroyed." A cheer went up from the bridge. Crew, they had actually killed one of the adaptive ships. It seemed impossible, but the proof was floating in space before them. "Again," Elena ordered. "Pick a new target and repeat the sequence." But the aliens were learning too. Elena could see them changing their formation, spreading out so her mixed attacks could only hit one ship at a time. Worse, they were starting to adapt to her new tactics. The next bioship she targeted managed to partially defend against the mixed assault. Elena needed something else. Some new tactic the aliens couldn't predict. "Helm, take us into the asteroid field," she commanded. "Captain?" The pilot looked shocked. "Those asteroids are moving at high velocity." If we hit that's the idea. The aliens have been fighting. In open space, let's see how they handle obstacles. The Defiance dove toward a cluster of spinning asteroids, each one the size of a city block. The alien ships followed, but their formation became ragged as they tried to avoid collisions. Elena waited until she was deep in the asteroid field, then gave her next order. Emergency stop, all thrusters reverse. The Defiance slammed on her brakes, throwing everyone forward against their restraints. 3 alien ships that had been pursuing her couldn't stop in time. They smashed into asteroids at high speed, their biohulls rupturing against solid rock. Use the asteroids as weapons. Elena told her helmsman. Ram the small ones into their ships. It was insane tactics that no military academy would ever teach, but it worked. The Defiance used her chemical thrusters to push asteroids into collision courses with alien vessels. The bioships could adapt to energy weapons and kinetic rounds, but they couldn't adapt to being crushed by million-ton rocks. War Prime Zexthal watched from his flagship as the human ship performed impossible maneuvers. His tactical computers couldn't predict what the humans would do next because their actions made no logical sense. Analysis, he demanded. His science officer, a creature with multiple heads, consulted its readings. The human ship is using random attack patterns. Their weapon combinations change with each assault. They are also using environmental hazards as weapons. Impossible. No species fights this way. The humans appear to be improvising, War Prime. They are not following any known tactical doctrine. Zexthal felt something he had not experienced in centuries of conquest, uncertainty. His bioships were still adapting to human weapons, but each adaptation only worked for a few minutes before the humans changed tactics again, back on the Defiance. Elena watched her chronometer. 1 hour and 15 minutes since the battle began. Her ship was battered and bleeding atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. Half her crew was wounded, but they were still fighting. Captain, Chun called from his engineering station. I've got an idea, a really crazy idea. At this point, crazy is all we have left, Chun pointed to his displays. The alien ships are biomechanical, right? They're living creatures. What if we could make them sick? Elena raised an eyebrow. Explain. Our fusion reactor puts out a specific type of radiation. If I modify the containment field, I can make it pulse in irregular patterns, like a seizure. The alien ships might try to adapt to it, but since it keeps changing, they'll never succeed. What's the downside? If I'm wrong, we lose main power and die in space. Elena looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted and scared, but they were still at their posts, still fighting against impossible odds. They deserved a captain who was willing to take risks. Do it. Chun disappeared back into the engineering section. Elena could hear him shouting orders to his teams, preparing to modify their ship's reactor while under fire. Captain, John called out, the aliens are massing for another attack. I count 40 ships moving into assault formation. Elena watched the aliens approach. They had learned from her tactics and were being more careful now, but she had one more surprise for them. Signal engineering, she ordered. Tell Chun we need his seizure generator in 30 seconds. The alien ships opened. Fire as one, sending a storm of energy beams toward the Defiance. Elena's ship shook under the assault, her armor glowing red-hot from the impacts. Then Chun's modified reactor came online. The Defiance began broadcasting radiation that pulsed and shifted in chaotic patterns. The alien ships immediately tried to adapt, their biohulls rippling as they attempted to process the constantly changing energy signature, but they couldn't adapt to something that never stayed the same. The bioships began to convulse, their living hulls spasming as their adaptation systems overloaded. Several vessels went dark, their consciousness overwhelmed by the chaotic input. Elena smiled grimly. The humans were teaching the galaxy a valuable lesson. Sometimes the best strategy was no strategy at all. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Elena believed they might actually survive long enough to complete their mission. The Defiance continued her deadly dance through Space, buying time with blood and determination. The Defiance was dying. 3 hours into the battle, the old cruiser looked like a floating wreck. Her hull was cracked in 17 places. Emergency patches covered holes where alien weapons had burned through her armor. Half her lights were out, and the air tasted of smoke and fear, but she was still fighting, Captain. Vasquez pulled herself up from the deck where the last explosion had thrown her. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes remained sharp and determined. Around her, the bridge crew worked at damaged stations, some of them injured but none of them giving up. "Damage report," she called out. Lieutenant Commander Santos, who had taken over from the wounded damage control officer, checked his readings. "We've lost decks 7 through 9 to decompression. Main engines are down to 60% power. Railgun batteries 3 and 5 are offline, and Captain ... He paused. "We've lost 231 crew members." Elena felt each death like a physical blow. These people had trusted her to lead them into battle. Now they were floating in space or trapped in sealed compartments, victims of her decision to fight an impossible war. "How many evacuation ships have cleared the system?" she asked quietly. "According to the last transmission, 86% of the civilian fleet has jumped to hyperspace," reported the communications officer. "The remaining ships should be clear within 2 hours. 2 more hours." Elena looked at her battered ship and wondered if they had 2 more minutes, let alone 2 more hours. The Defiance was held together by emergency patches and sheer stubbornness. Chief Engineer Chun stumbled onto the bridge, his uniform burned and his left arm in a makeshift sling. "Captain, we have a problem." "Just one?" Elena asked with bitter humor. "The reactor containment field is failing. All that modification I did to create the seizure generator is tearing the magnetic bottles apart. If it collapses completely, we'll have a fusion breach." Elena understood what that meant. A fusion breach would vaporize the entire ship in seconds. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 30 minutes, maybe less." Elena stared at the tactical display. 73 alien ships still surrounded her vessel, firing in coordinated waves. Her own weapons were nearly exhausted. She had 4 nuclear torpedoes left and barely enough power to fire the railguns. "Options?" she asked. Chun looked uncomfortable. "We could try to restore the original containment field, but that means shutting down the seizure generator. The aliens will adapt to our normal weapons again." Elena nodded slowly. Without the chaotic radiation that was confusing their adaptation systems, the alien ships would quickly become immune to human weapons again. But with the reactor failing, they would all die anyway. "Do it," she decided. "Restore normal containment." As Chun hurried back to engineering, Elena studied the enemy formation. The aliens had learned to be more careful after her unconventional attacks. They stayed spread out and avoided the asteroid fields, but they had also grown confident. After 3 hours of battle, they probably thought the human ship was finished. They were probably right. Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's science officer, approached Elena's command chair. Kim was a small woman with quick eyes who had joined the crew from the university on Kepler Station. She was supposed to be studying stellar phenomena, not fighting for her life. "Captain, I've been analyzing the alien bioships," Kim said. "I think I've found something important." Elena turned to listen. At this point, any new information might help. "The alien ships are all connected," Kim explained. "They share a neural network that allows them to communicate instantly and share adaptation data. That's why when one ship learns to stop our weapons, they all learn." "We suspected that already," Elena replied. "Yes, but here's what we didn't know. The network has a weakness. It can't handle too much chaotic information at once. When we used the seizure generator, some of their ships shut down completely. Their shared consciousness couldn't process the random data." Elena felt a spark of interest. "Keep talking." Kim activated her datapad and showed Elena a complex diagram. "The network is like a computer system. Feed it too much random information and it crashes. But it has to be the right kind of chaos. Not just random energy, but random behavior." "What do you mean?" "The aliens expect logical tactics. Even our mixed weapon attacks follow the pattern. But what if we could introduce pure chaos into their network? Something so random and illogical that their collective mind couldn't process it? Elena stared at the diagram. How? We'd need to get close to their flagship. Close enough to transmit directly into their neural network. And then we feed them pure human chaos. Elena understood what Kim was suggesting. It was insane, even by the standards of this battle. You want us to ram their flagship and upload. What exactly? Human behavioral patterns. Music, poetry, random. Conversations, contradictory orders. Anything that doesn't follow logical rules. The alien mind is designed for efficiency and adaptation. It can't handle true randomness. Elena looked around her bridge. Half the consoles were damaged, the air was thick with smoke. Her crew was exhausted and wounded. The idea of charging directly at the massive alien flagship was beyond suicidal, but they were dead anyway. The reactor was failing and they were vastly outnumbered. At least this way, they might accomplish something. Chun, she called over the intercom. How much power can you give me for one final attack run? The chief engineer's voice crackled back through static. If I dump everything into the engines, including life support reserves, I can give you full power for maybe 10 minutes. But after that, we're dead in space. Do it. And prepare to download everything from the ship's computer. Personal files, music libraries, maintenance logs, anything with human content. Elena turned to Kim. Doctor, you have 5 minutes to prepare your chaos virus. Use everything human you can find. As the crew rushed to prepare for their final attack, Elena opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. We're going to make one last run at the enemy flagship. Our goal is not to destroy it, but to confuse it. We're going to teach these aliens what happens when they mess with human minds. She paused, looking around at her battered bridge. I won't lie to you, this is a suicide mission. But if it works, we might save millions of lives in the colonies. And we'll go down in history as the crew that stopped the unstoppable. Elena strapped herself into her command chair. Helm, plot a course directly for the alien flagship. Maximum burn. The Defiance shuddered as her engines came to full power. Chemical thrusters that hadn't fired at maximum capacity in decades roared to life, pushing the damaged ship forward. She accelerated toward the massive bioship like a bullet fired from a gun. The alien vessels moved to intercept, but Elena had timed her run perfectly. She was coming in from the blind spot behind a cluster of asteroids, and by the time the aliens detected her approach, she was already too close for them to stop. Energy beams lanced out from the enemy ships, striking the Defiance's armor. But the old ship kept coming, her thick hull absorbing damage that would have vaporized a newer vessel. Range to target, 2,000 kilometers in closing. Reported the helmsman. Elena could see the alien flagship growing larger on her screen. It was massive beyond belief, a living mountain that pulsed with bioelectric energy. Weapon ports along its hull were beginning to glow as it prepared to fire. Kim, is your virus ready? Elena shouted over the noise of alarms and explosions. Ready, Captain. I've loaded it with everything I could find. Human music, poetry, personal messages, even cooking recipes, pure chaos. 1,000 kilometers. The helmsman called out, the alien flagship opened fire. Beams of concentrated energy struck the Defiance like the hammer of an angry god. The ship's armor glowed white-hot and began to buckle. Hull breach on all decks, Santos reported. We're losing atmosphere fast. Hold course, Elena ordered. Don't stop for anything. 500 kilometers. Elena could see details on the alien ship now. Its biohull rippled like living skin. Weapon clusters tracked their approach. This close, the creature was impossibly vast, dwarfing her cruiser like a whale next to a minnow. Transmission range, Kim announced. Do it, Elena commanded. Upload. Everything. Dr. Kim's fingers flew over her console as she transmitted years of human data directly into the alien neural network. Music by Mozart and heavy metal bands. Poetry by Shakespeare and anonymous colonists. Personal letters from homesick soldiers. Cooking shows and comedy programs and philosophical debates, all of it poured into the alien consciousness like a flood. Of pure human chaos, the effect was immediate. The alien flagship convulsed as if in pain. Its weapon fire became erratic, missing the Defiance completely. Along the hull, bioelectric patterns flickered and went dark. "It's working," Kim shouted. "Their network is overloading," but the Defiance was dying too. Her engines finally gave out, leaving her coasting toward the alien ship on momentum alone. Her hull was breached in dozens of places and most of her crew was already dead. Elena smiled as she watched the alien ships around her begin to shut down one by one. The chaos virus was spreading through their network, crashing their collective consciousness with pure human unpredictability. "Message to the evacuation fleets," she ordered, with her dying breath. "Mission accomplished. The colonies are safe." The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. The Defiance and the alien flagship died together in a ball of nuclear fire that could be seen from 3 star systems away. For a moment, the burning wreckage outshone the local sun. Then the light faded, leaving only twisted metal and cooling plasma, but the real damage was invisible across the Kethmoran Armada. Bioships convulsed as the chaos virus spread through their neural network. The collective consciousness that had made them unstoppable was now tearing itself apart. Human thoughts, human emotions, human randomness flooded through their shared minds like poison. War Prime Zexthal felt his perfect order crumbling. His 6 eyes flickered as contradictory information overwhelmed his processors. Music played in his head alongside tactical data, poetry mixed with weapon specifications. The logical patterns that defined his existence were dissolving into madness. "What is happening?" he demanded, but his voice came out as song lyrics from an ancient human ballad. His science officers tried to respond, but their words came out as cooking recipes and love letters. The viral chaos was spreading faster than they could contain it. Ship after ship went dark as their bio-consciousness shut down to protect itself from the flood of human illogic. The mighty armada that had conquered 17 star systems drifted helpless in space, their living hulls pulsing weakly like dying hearts. 3 days later, the first rescue ships arrived. Captain Torres of the medical frigate Mercy's Hope stared at her sensors in disbelief. Where intelligence reports had described a massive alien fleet, she found only floating hulks. 200 bioships hung motionless in space, their once fearsome weapons cold and silent. "Are they dead?" asked her science officer. Torres studied the readings. "No, they're alive, but their neural activity is minimal, like they're in some kind of coma." The rescue fleet spread out through the debris field, searching for survivors from the Defiance. What they found was heartbreaking. Escape pods scattered through space, most of them damaged beyond repair. Life signs were faint and scattered. In the largest piece of wreckage, searchers found 43 survivors huddled in an emergency shelter that had once been the ship's chapel. They were injured, hungry, and traumatized. But alive, among them was Chief Engineer Marcus Chun, his arm in a crude splint but his eyes still sharp. When the rescue teams reached him, his first words were not about his injuries. "Did it work?" he asked. "Are the colonies safe?" Captain Torres nodded. "The evacuation fleets made it out. 8 million people are safe because of what you did here." Chun closed his eyes and smiled. "Elena would be glad to hear that." The news of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Kethmoran Armada, unstoppable for 10 years, had been defeated by a single human warship. The story seemed impossible, but the evidence floated in space for all to see. The Galactic Council, which had written off the human colonies as lost, suddenly found themselves very interested in human military capabilities. Ambassadors who had once dismissed humanity as primitive now requested urgent meetings. Admiral Sarah Park, Elena's former classmate at the Naval Academy, was placed in charge of the investigation. She interviewed every survivor and studied every piece of wreckage. What she discovered changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans. The Defiance was not a special ship, Park explained to the council representatives. She was old, outdated, and outgunned. Her crew was not elite. Soldiers. They were volunteers from farming and mining colonies. What made them special was that they were human. The alien ambassadors listened with growing unease as Park described the battle. The use of mixed weapon attacks. The ramming with asteroids. The chaos virus that had crashed an entire fleet's collective consciousness. "You fight without logic," observed the crystalline representative from Altair Prime. "Your tactics make no strategic sense." "Exactly," Park replied. "That's what makes us dangerous." The Kethmoran could adapt to any weapon because weapons follow physical laws. But they couldn't adapt to human creativity because creativity has no rules. In the weeks that followed, xenobiologists studied the dormant Kethmoran ships. What they found was disturbing. The biovessels were not just weapons. They were a form of collective artificial intelligence designed to learn and adapt with perfect efficiency, but the human chaos virus had corrupted their core programming. The ship's biocomputers were caught in endless loops, trying to process contradictory human thoughts. Love songs crashed into military protocols, philosophical debates, overloaded tactical systems. Jokes short-circuited strategic planning algorithms. Dr. Elizabeth Foster, the lead xenobiologist, published her findings in a report that became required reading throughout the galaxy. The Kethmoran consciousness was the ultimate logical mind. She wrote, "It could solve any problem, adapt to any threat, overcome any challenge. But it had no defense against illogic. Human thought patterns are fundamentally chaotic, driven by emotion and intuition rather than pure reason. When that chaos entered their system, it was like introducing a virus into a computer. The more they tried to understand us, the more confused they became. The surviving Kethmoran ships remained in their comatose state. Attempts to wake them failed. Their bioconsciousness had shut down so completely that they were essentially brain-dead. The mighty armada became a floating graveyard, a monument. To the day humans proved that logic was not always stronger than chaos, War Prime Zexthal himself survived. But he was no longer the terrifying conqueror who had terrorized the galaxy. The chaos virus had scrambled his neural patterns so thoroughly that he could barely speak. When he tried to give orders, poetry came out instead. When he attempted strategic planning, he found himself humming human lullabies. The other species of the galaxy watched these developments with a mixture of awe and fear. Humans had defeated the unstoppable with a single outdated warship. What did that say about human military potential? What did it mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? The answer came sooner than expected, 6 months after the Battle of the Outer Colonies, as historians were already calling it. Another threat emerged from the galactic rim. The Void Hunters, a race of energy beings that consumed entire stars, began moving toward inhabited space. The Council mobilized every fleet they had, but early encounters suggested that conventional weapons were useless against creatures made of pure energy. That was when they came to Earth. The human delegation was led by Admiral Park, now promoted to head of human space forces. The council chamber fell silent as she entered, followed by representatives from every human colony. These were no longer the primitive newcomers who had joined the council 50 years ago. These were the people who had stopped the unstoppable. "We need your help," admitted the council president, a being of living crystal whose voice rang like breaking glass. "Our weapons cannot touch the Void Hunters, but perhaps your unconventional methods might succeed where logic has failed." "Admiral," Park smiled, "we'll help, but there are conditions." The negotiations took 3 days. When they were complete, humanity had gone from junior members of the Galactic Council to full partners with equal voting rights. Human military advisors were assigned to every major fleet. Human tactical doctrine became required study at military academies across the galaxy, but most importantly, a new class of warship was commissioned. The Elena Vasquez-class heavy cruiser was built to human specifications, thick armor instead of shields, kinetic weapons instead of energy beams, and crews trained in creative thinking rather than rigid doctrine. The first ship of the class was launched exactly 1 year after the battle. As tradition demanded, she was christened with a name that honored the original. But this time, the name was painted in letters of gold across her prow. Use Defiance 2. Admiral Park spoke at the launch ceremony, her words broadcast across the galaxy. 1 year ago, Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew taught the universe a simple lesson: humans don't know when to quit, we don't know when to surrender, and we definitely don't know when something is impossible. She paused as the new ship's engines lit up, pushing her away from the orbital shipyard toward the stars. Today we launch not just a ship, but a promise. Wherever tyranny threatens the innocent, wherever the strong prey upon the weak, wherever someone decides that resistance is futile, they'll find humans standing in their way. And we'll keep standing there until the job is done. The Defiance 2 accelerated into hyperspace, carrying her message to the stars. Behind her, 50 more ships of the same class waited in construction bays. The galaxy had learned to fear human weapons, but now they would learn to rely on human courage. The age of human expansion had begun, built on the sacrifice of one old ship and her determined crew. In the end, the Cathmoran had been right about one thing. Humans were primitive, illogical, and unpredictable. That was exactly what made them unstoppable.